Another reason to rethink your holiday plans, the federal government is reintroducing molecular testing requirements for all travelers returning to Canada, even if that trip was less than 72 hours, and the tests must be completed outside of Canada. Canada is also lifting the flight ban from 10 African countries. Omar Alghabra is the Minister of Transport. He's in Ottawa. Hi, Minister. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Paul. It's good to be back on the show with you.
So you're dropping the flight ban from those 10 African countries starting Saturday. Is this not a tacit admission that the policy wasn't sound in the first place?
No, Paul. At the time when we made the announcement, we said that we needed to act quickly and swiftly based on the information and the data that is before us. And at that time, it was based on the information that we had. There is evidence of community transmission in specific or that in that region. And what we also committed to at that time, as information changes, we will change and adjust our measures. And this is what we announced today.
Starting Tuesday, all travelers will need to get a molecular test before returning to Canada. Why wait until Tuesday, given how fast this is spreading?
Paul, we're constantly adding measures at our border to protect the health and safety of Canadians. The operation of this measure needs to be to give travelers a few days' notice in order to allow for those people who already left the country on a short trip to be of the previous rules to be able to come back on those rules, under those rules. And now we want to give new travelers ample time to know that the rule has changed.
How worried are you about how this is all going to, once again, play out with border communities? Windsor, for example, who had been looking to go to Detroit over the holidays, businesses who depend on cross-border shopping, that kind of thing. Is the underlying message tough luck? This is just what it is? What do you say?
But Paul, let me just say how extremely frustrated I am to be back in this position. I get no joy or satisfaction out of these new measures. And I know how much not only border towns and the people who live along the border have suffered, but also people who work in the aviation sector and in the tourism sector have suffered tremendously. And overall, Canada and Canadians have sacrificed a lot. The reality is that now we're dealing with this new variant that is transmitting incredibly rapidly, and that there are still a lot of unanswered questions about its severity. And it is the prudent and the responsible thing to do for us to add these layers of protection. And having said that, we are committed to working with all duos who have been impacted, as we have demonstrated in the past, to work with them on mitigating some of these challenges, on finding support for them. But I take no joy in reinstating some of those measures, Paul.
You mentioned the airline industry. As you may know, we had Andy Gibbons on our program yesterday, I think. He's WestJet's Vice President of Government Relations. We were, of course, talking about federal advice against non-essential international travel. Want to talk about the point he was making, but let's first listen to a bit of what he said.
Our main issue is a frustration that we are sliding back into blanket policies, whereas other countries have more tailored travel guidance that is dependent on the country you're visiting, the type of travel you're thinking about. So the promise of vaccinations and the promise of testing was so that we wouldn't have blanket travel advisories anymore that we fundamentally don't think serve the traveling public.
Is he right, Minister? Seeking something a bit more tailored, a bit more specific. The airline industry, as you noted, is hurting.
Yeah, Paul, let me take a moment to acknowledge that the airline industry has suffered a lot. The airline workers have suffered a lot, and that this added measure is going to set back a lot of the gains they've made. And I acknowledge that, and I want to recognize the work that they've done over the last year and a half. And I understand their frustration. And that's, of course, initially what we did a couple of weeks ago when we announced targeted measures to specific regions in the world. As we learn more now about the presence of Omicron, about how quickly it transmits, we had to adjust these measures and recognizing the kind of impact it will have. But it was the prudent thing to do for all of Canada, for Canadians, for our economy, for Canadians who are thinking of traveling abroad. We are worried about Canadians who might be traveling internationally and get sick. And then we're worried about them being in a country where that country changes its own border measures. We're worried about Canadians who travel abroad and then Canada adds another layers of protection. So we thought it was the responsible thing to do. I know it's just before Christmas. Again, I get no satisfaction out of this, but it's the responsible thing to notify Canadians, to warn Canadians about the risks that they may be incurring if they traveled internationally.
But meanwhile, as we well know, Omicron is throughout Canada. So I mean, what about interprovincial travel? The same risk on the basis of what you just described would present itself that way. You're flying, you're going to another place, you're coming back from where you've been potentially with Omicron or taking it with you, depending, it gets complicated. But what about interprovincial travel? Has thought been given to that?
Yeah, let me also add to my previous comment that we've worked with the airline sector by providing billions of dollars of support when they incurred significant reductions of volume, and we will continue to work with them. As for your question about interprovincial travel, as you know, the Prime Minister held a meeting Tuesday night with premiers. We are in regular contact with our provincial counterparts. Province after province are now announcing their own domestic public health measures. We ask Canadians to follow their own local public health measures. And if a province decides to put additional measures on interprovincial travel, they will do so based on their own domestic situation. We are doing what we're responsible for, which is international travel. And we're following the advice that makes sense. The more people interact with other people, the higher the risk they have in contracting COVID. So we're recommending that Canadians try to limit interaction and to limit international travel. And
would you say that principle applies even to travel within a province in terms of limiting interaction? What is your underlying message here broadly, again, for the... we've said it so many times as we go into the holiday season where, interaction is, rules. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and look, the local public health officers and local governments are making decisions based on their own circumstances. Maybe if I were to issue a blanket advice to all Canadians, we all have to be careful. We all have to limit, I would say, our interaction and reduce the number of people we're interacting with to be on the safe side. We should all get vaccinated. We should all get a third dose when we're eligible for it. We should all wear masks. It's really the prudent thing to do for not only the health and safety of Canadians, but also to protect the gains that we've made in our economy.
All right, Minister, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. And if I don't see you before the holidays, happy holidays and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.